I'm a reviewer who dreamt he was a man and loved it, but now the dream is over and the reviewer is awake. Let's talk about The Fly.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So let's just get straight into it. Daniel, can you let the people know what we're going to be discussing today?
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. And this is also the first week in our annual Halloween season, in which we go back to classic horror movies that some of us know well and others are just experiencing for the first time. We're starting it off this year with The Fly from 1986, which is a David Cronenberg body horror movie about a scientist who invents teleportation and tries to make it work and prove to the world that he can do it in the hopes that it will revolutionize the world and he will go down in history as one of the great geniuses. And this is followed by a journalist who he has a relationship with, who stumbles into this and decides to follow and document his story. And she then witnesses his attempts to make this technology work and watches him undergo an accident as he is merged with a fly during a test of the teleporter. And the story then unfolds from there. So I've seen The Fly a bunch of times, and you guys have just seen it for the first time, right?
Yep, correct.
Yep.
So what did we think of The Fly?
I have never been more happy to see a movie come to an end than The Fly. And not because I dislike the movie and not because I hated it at all. Because this is a very, 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 very good movie. But more so, it was just horrific and it was gross. And you could kind of see what was coming very early on. Like even before he started to fully transform into the Brundle or whatever it was called, you could just see small changes in this texture of his skin and the way that he was looking, that small cut in his back and things like that. And I don't know, I didn't expect to be as grossed out as I was for a movie that's from the 1986. But they did all of that brilliantly well. But this was great. This was fantastic. This was actually a really good easing into what the story is and getting to know the characters, getting to know the motivations, getting to know the relationship and the dynamic between the two of them. What I liked about this was it wasn't really anyone really being villainous in how he turned out. It was just drunk, spur of the moment thing because he kind of felt jaded, and then kind of everything unfolded after that, and you kind of really start to see the kind of almost the rise and the complete fall of this character. And it was actually quite tragic by the end of it, how it turned out for him, knowing that it was just one mistake, and if he just waited a little bit longer, he maybe would have had more information, or maybe it would have been uncontrollable because at any point a fly could have entered, and that would have been an unknown variable that he wasn't aware of at the time. But yeah, I don't know. This was really well done. This was a great story, not too complex, not too many characters. Really focused on the three core characters in this particular, well, really two, and then one additional one, and just told a really really great story, sort of front to back.
How about you, Jonathan? What's your takeaway?
For me, it's 50-50. I would say the transformation and the progression of the transformation, us watching it, felt similar to The Wolfman in terms of experiencing firsthand what it's like transforming into a monster or transforming into an insect, whatever, right? And that's something which I enjoyed. I wouldn't say I didn't. Well, I can't even lie and say I didn't enjoy it. The reason why I thought 50-50 is because the performance felt a bit boring. That being said, I enjoyed the story, which is a bit crazy because I enjoyed the story, but just the way that they were performing it, just their performance was a bit boring. So that's why I was a bit 50-50 because it was hard to engage in it. However, like I said, just watching how he's slowly transforming into a fly, that was really enjoyable. So that's why my experience with this one was I'm not mad at it at all. I did enjoy like I said, I enjoyed the story because I think a lot of the movies now, I don't want to kind of sound generic, but it is true. A lot of the stories now is it's missing a story. It's they'll rather show you exciting events rather than actually tell a story. And that's what it felt like. I was telling a story because obviously it's fitting because she's a journalist, right? So it was fitting to her profession. It followed pretty much the rules of it. So I was yeah, this is it. It would just have been way better. I would have my experience would have been way better if it didn't feel so dull. I think that's the best way to say. just the way that they were performing. So that was my main issue with the film. But in terms of the story itself, and in terms of seeing the transformation, how he's slowly transforming into a fly, that was really fun to watch, and I was really enjoyable. I said, this is really cool. Even the design of it, the aesthetic of it, I was like, flipping out. This is disgusting. Like, it was like, the first thing that came into my mind was Thing as well. Like, it was so like, just the design back in the day was, I just want it to be like how it is now. Now it seems so fake. It's just like a lot of, well, they use a lot of VFX, right? So I think you mentioned it, Daniel, as well. Like, they just don't invest as much money into set designs anymore because obviously of technology, and they'll rather use, like stuff like VFX and etc. for stuff like this. It was refreshing seeing a monster in that design.
So this is kind of, I would count this as kind of the end stage of the golden age of creature designs, where it's mostly practical with puppets and prosthetics and all of that, and a little bit maybe of CGI, like the teleportation effect is CGI, for instance, right? I think I counted 7 stages that Brundlefly goes through, and then there's also like the inverted baboon that's just turned inside out and kind of dies just on the floor of the teleportation device. There's a real thing lying there, right? Like, it's clearly a puppet, right? But it's like there's something really there, and it's really flopping around, and it's really making those smacking noises against the floor and all of that, right? So I think that gives it a different, like, at no point do we believe that Brundlefly is real, right? But because it's not just a generic CGI monster that was kind of put in post and the actors were acting against tennis balls, I do think it creates a certain groundedness and a certain believability, or I think it makes it easier for your brain to accept it and to forget that it's not real, right? And that then is the inroads into the actual story. So I think this is kind of one of those where this was kind of the sweet spot, where, like, we saw The Thing last year that has a similar thing. Like, I think it looks very similar to The Thing in terms of its style. I think that's definitely one of the highlights. You guys also mentioned something about how much emphasis is put on the transformation itself, right? And I think the comparison with Wolfman, I think that movie was very flawed, but it got one thing right, which is the first-person experience of turning into a monster. And here we're not getting it from the first person, but we're watching Brundle turn into this creature, and he's, at first he notices small changes, and then they get bigger, and then he's afraid, and then he's coping with it, and finally he begs to be killed, right? Like when this terrifying fly creature is using its stump of an arm to guide the shotgun to its forehead, begging non-verbally to be killed because it can't stand its own existence. Like, that's kind of the culmination of the entire thing, and it begins with a little hair on his back, right? And I think the fact that I think that is very much the core of the movie, and it knows that it needs to focus on that, and it needs to get that right, and I think it does, and I think that is why this movie works so much.
By the way, let me just quickly say, I was going to add on to the whole VFX comment. Kind of VFX is like for like Avengers stuff, like, you know what I'm saying, more of the environment and just, sci-fi stuff. Thank you for adding in CGI that I just couldn't think of it at the time.
And it's a bit cliche to complain about CGI, right? But I think one of the problems with CGI is that everything looks the same. Like, it's very rare that I watch a modern movie like this made in the last 25 years and the creature design is actually interesting. It's very rare. They're all kind of similar. They all kind of look like the trolls from Lord of the Rings, right? Like gray skin, strange proportions, putty face, right? Like, it
looks less real, which is annoying. And I was going to ask, is it because did you say the reason why they stopped investing in actual set designs, creature designs, because it costs less money, as in like the CGI costs less money to use?
I don't think so. Like, good CGI is still very expensive, but I don't know exactly what the reasoning is, other than it's the most advanced technology, and when it works, it really works, right? Like, every movie you watch has CGI in it, and in most cases you don't realize it, right? Like, backgrounds and people walking in the background, and even probably if there's like a street in the background that goes like a side street or something, that's probably CGI. Even movies that are not science fiction or superhero or something like that will have plenty of CGI in them. But I think with creature designs, I think it matters that there's nothing there, that actors are acting into a void, and that I think is the big problem. And here, Geena Davis is interacting with something, right? And she reacts to something, and she has to look at the puppet that is standing in front of her and stuff like this, right? So I think that all just improves kind of the feeling of it. So going back to the transformation, I think we've mentioned how important the transformation is, but there's also Ronnie watching him undergo these different stages. And I think her reaction to it, and at first she's concerned and then she's afraid and then she's angry and then she's concerned again. Like there's an entire journey here where she's just, like, on paper she doesn't do very much, right? Like on paper she kind of sits there and watches. But I think if we make the effort to get into her head throughout the movie, there's a lot going on there. It's just there's nothing she can do. All she can do is watch him undergo these different stages and undergo the transformation and watch him die, essentially. And so I think she conveys that really well.
You say that. I was actually going to say, I think she was, where like Jonathan was saying about the kind of like the performance and the actors feeling a little bit dull. I feel like Jeff Goldblum in this movie is kind of firing on all cylinders and puts in like a bit of a stellar performance. But her, I kind of like, eventually I kind of got used to her in the movie. It was almost like how slow she was to kind of like react to certain things, or like how slow she was to kind of like, or it was just kind of like some of the dialogue in it. And granted, that's maybe how people spoke back in 1986, and the movies are a reflection of it, because obviously you kind of see this type of like dialogue and this type of sort of kind of back and forth a lot in movies from that time. But I just kind of felt like, I don't know, I was just kind of wanting it a little bit more, and I was like left really wanting, not to say that it was bad, but you know, when you're kind of performing opposite Jeff Goldblum in this particular movie, I just didn't feel like the same charisma coming from her. But of course you kind of do still feel the struggles in her journey, like kind of going back and forth. Obviously this is someone that she really cares about, so you know, you do kind of feel something at minimum when she's kind of wrestling with some of these decisions. And but like even the scene where she finds out that he's like slept with this like other woman, he's brought this other woman back, I don't know, you just kind of want more of reaction, more assertiveness, more kind of like, I don't know, dominant in that scene. But she just kind of really felt passive for a lot of the movie. And I know she doesn't do much, but like more passive in her reactions and her emotions, and like how much that really came out. And it just really felt like you could have plug and placed a different actor in there and kind of got the same result.
Maybe, and certainly, and like anybody acting against Jeff Goldblum is going to look a little bit small, right? Because that's just his style. First of all, I do think it feels natural. It feels like she's a real person, to me at least. I don't think it feels like she's too passive or too timid or anything like that. Just some people are just like that, right? Also, when he takes home this woman from the bar after he's won her in an arm wrestling contest, right? Which is essentially what happens. And then Ronnie comes back to him, I think, to talk to him, and she finds him like this. And like at that point, she doesn't have a very strong reaction, but that's because she's already moved on. Like she's already burned the bridge in her head. And we do see her actually assert herself a bunch of times, right? So when, is it Stethis, right? That's the incredibly 80s editor, right? Who she's had a relationship with and who just won't leave her alone. And he confronts her in this store where I think she's buying a jacket for Brundle or something like that, right? And he basically won't leave her alone, and she completely snaps at him and basically tells him, "I'm gonna do whatever I want. Like you don't own, you don't control me," that sort of thing. She's plenty assertive when the situation calls for it, right? I'm not sure that was needed in her interactions with Brundle himself.
Yeah, I think kind of when I say assertive, I probably like, because there was even in that scene when he's brought this other girl, or when he's won the other girl in an arm wrestle and brought her back to his place, because she's like also assertive in that sense where he's trying to put her in a teleport machine and she's like, no, like, you know, it's dangerous or whatever. I can't remember exactly what she says, but essentially she says no. But I think, and probably a little bit of confusion in how I kind of phrased it, when I say assertive, I kind of meant like, I don't know, assertive to the audience in terms of like how strongly she kind of like conveyed certain things. But again, it might just be a case where it just didn't resonate with me as much as maybe other people. But yeah, that's kind of just, I just want to like clear that one up.
Yeah, without dwelling too much on that, I do think she does have plenty of agency. It's just walking away from a bad situation by itself is already agency, right? Like that is not passivity. So when she walks away from Brundle because he keeps treating her badly, that is taking agency and taking initiative, right? And then when she comes back to try to help him and he does not treat her well, she's not just a pushover, right? also, I think you do have to grade a little bit on a curve, and the 80s were just weird like this. When he picks her up at this fundraiser event or social event, and they go back to his lab and all of that. That's a very 80s sequence, right? And 40 years later, it does feel a little bit weird and whatever. But I think if you grade on a curve and you compare to other movies from the 80s, I think there's plenty going on with Ronnie, in my opinion. Moving on to the body horror. So I think we've talked a little bit about the transformation, but I think the body horror itself, I think, is a really major part of this as well, right? Where he's losing teeth, he's losing fingernails, he's transforming in some way, right? So what effect did that work for you? Was it too much? Was it too little? How did you experience that?
I liked it because there was mystery to it. Because at first I was wondering, what exactly is he transforming into? Until obviously he revealed that he was transforming into the Fly. But before that, I was trying to figure out what it was, because obviously he had superhuman. Well, he did kind of have superhuman strength. It was interesting. I was trying to figure out why exactly this was happening. So just to link to your question, yeah, it was interesting. I liked it because there was mystery to it. It was just pleasing to the eye as well, like I said, because CGI doesn't really give this. Well, it gives it, but like you said before, it all kind of feels the same. Whereas with this one, it just looked real because it's actually designed by us humans. You know what I'm saying? It looked more real. It just looked nice, even though it was disgusting.
I was gonna say, for me, it really got me because I knew this was the first movie in our Halloween series. So for about 40% or the first 50% of the movie, I was very confused as to why this was classed as a horror movie. And the whole time I'm waiting for the twist or waiting for it to kind of turn bad. And even when he then first fused with the Fly, I then thought it would kind of go the typical route where he starts to terrorize people. But it didn't, and it was more gruesomeness of his transformation, and like I said, things like his teeth falling out, even small stuff when he first did the arm, when he was in the arm wrestle, and you saw the goo come out of his fingers for the first time and stick to the guy's hand. It's they're really setting not setting things up and paying it off, but they're kind of building towards it, and then slowly showing the transformation. You can kind of start to see okay, this change is coming and this change is happening. By the end of it, I was I've seen more than enough. I've seen way too much, especially when he's kind of releasing that fluid on the other guys, the guy's arm and leg, and again even those visuals of his hand, knowing that was done in the 80s was pretty cool. The leg maybe a little bit more janky, but the arm was done really well. But yeah, just that whole sequence, I was just nah, I need this to end. And then when he turned into the actual Fly, I was what the hell is going on? This is just weird. Where's this Fly bit? It was just living inside of this person or whatever. And yeah.
One thing though, could we say, I wouldn't say inconsistent, but could we say there was a bit of a that doesn't make sense moment? Unless I missed it, because he was transforming into a fly. Flies aren't strong. How come he developed superhuman strength?
Yeah, so I don't think it follows directly from it being a fly. It's more he's not just turning into a fly. His body, his DNA and the fly's DNA are merged, and his body is trying to figure it out, right? It's got fly genes in it that are now doing stuff that they're not meant to be doing. And so it's got unpredictable consequences, right? And I feel the strength does not, flies are not, ants are known for being able to lift 10 times their body weight and stuff like that, right? So if this was the ant and suddenly he can lift a car, that would check out, right? That would make sense, right? So I think you're right that it doesn't directly follow. It's more about, because of his condition, his body is doing unpredictable things. And he's also in a bargaining stage. This has been awful, but maybe it's building towards something better. I'm smarter, I feel better, I'm stronger, I can walk on walls. I have to digest my food outside my body and then drink it, right? That's not very nice, but I can do that, without, I can deal with that, right? So after the initial fear, he has this idea of, what if I'm turning into something better? And that then kind of feeds into his ego of wanting to be the most brilliant scientist who has ever lived. And, he's turning into a superior being, and he wants to force other people or push other people into undergoing the same thing, because if people are horrified at him or want to cure him, that's because their minds are so small, and he has to make them or trick them into undergoing the same process, and then they will thank him later. And then that's like a fake out, not on the audience but on the character, where he then it then goes completely wrong after after he teleports again, and he just comes out as this fly creature that is so in pain and suffering to such a degree that he just wants it to end. So it's this roller coaster. I think that is important. This idea that the strength is kind of seemingly, so it just feels for a second like he is improving and turning into something better, and that only lasts very briefly. So I think that's what that is about. So one of you mentioned this, is that Brundle doesn't really turn into a monster, right? Like he does not really he doesn't start killing people, he doesn't start rampaging or whatever, right? He does a little bit when he abducts Ronnie, right? But that's kind of it. Like he doesn't turn into a monster that needs to be killed, that needs to be hunted. Did you pick up on that, and what did you think about that as a storytelling choice?
I actually liked it because it then added a lot more emotion and added a lot more weight to the characters involved, in terms of this one decision that he had made, and he had to live with it, and he wasn't kind of subjugating other people, and it didn't quite turn into, like, I won't say a farce, but this whole now we have to kill the monster, and it kind of takes the movie out of what was being built before, because again, like I said, like all the character stuff that they had done beforehand was really well done, and they just continued it, as opposed to, here's your action now, and here's, like, him killing a bunch of people. So I actually thought that they made the right choice by not making him a rampaging monster, and continuing to focus on the emotion, the heart, and just like his struggle. And you could really feel, again, like his ego, and like you can really feel him trying to like outsmart the situation that he was in, but ultimately kind of like succumbing to it in the end. And for me, it just kind of felt it made for a better movie. And I know maybe some people would like a little bit more action and sort of kind of edge of your seat stuff in these type of movies, but I don't know, it just really worked for me, and just really kind of I think I've repeated now, just like really made you feel for the character in sort of his transformation and everything that he was going through.
Jonathan, I think you said earlier that like the way the story unfolded was a little bit on the boring side for you. Is this kind of what you meant? That it's ultimately
No,
just, or
no, no, no.
do you think it would have been improved by Brundle turning into a monster in some way, or did you mean something else?
Well, two things. First thing is, no, not at all. The story I liked. I said the story it was good, because just going through the transformation with him as the audience, that's what was good about it. It was like, because like I said, similarities with the whole Wolfman in terms of just like kind of like experience the transformation firsthand was similar to this one. So I said the story was great. It was just the performance was just boring. I felt like there was some inconsistencies regarding with obviously the transformation, and like for example, I was a bit confused. Like for example, your question in terms of like would it have been more exciting if he was like a raging monster? For me, it would be like, why would he be if he's transforming into a fly? So you know what I'm saying, so literally, so yeah, so for me, it wouldn't have made sense. I do get it. Like I shouldn't. Maybe it's a thing where I shouldn't looking into it so literal and allow it to have some sort of space for like just like creativity and freedom when it comes to just like the whole monster. Him transforming into a monster. But but at the same time, it's like the story feels very. It doesn't feel like it has a loose storyline where, like, just like for example, the dialogue, it just is very articulate, and just the storyline feels very articulate. And it feels very like it knows what it's doing, and each event that's happening makes sense, and it adds to the story. And you know what I'm saying, it just adds to the story, and it just all makes sense, right? So it doesn't feel like we're just watching a series of events unfolding. We're watching actually a series of events which builds a story. So, question: I was a bit confused why there was like a scene where he told, I forgot the girl's name, but the main actress Ronnie. He said to her, "I'm getting kind of like the urge to hurt you," or something like that. Why would he be getting the urge to hurt her if it's a thing where he's transforming into a fly?
I've just kept counted that as he's undergoing a change and he doesn't understand the change, and he just has sensations that he's not used to. So
I see.
that's kind of, and because he's getting stronger, he's feeling more powerful, he's feeling more pure, and he's also is in the frame of mind where he doesn't, like, he thinks everybody else has to catch up with him, everybody else has to be forced to see the light, and that includes her. And
But
so he's now able to force her to do what he thinks she should be doing. I think it's an interplay of those two things.
But do you think the general audience will interpret it that way? Because I don't think this is something where, like, some of the stuff, like the justifications that you've had for the reasons why he done certain things, for the reason why the transformation happened, and it makes sense. But the way I took it as, like, firsthand, this guy's transforming into a fly. So I'm like, okay, if he transformed into a fly, I was like searching stuff like, okay, what, like, how do flies behave? How strong is a fly? Like, literally just what I did after the movie. So I'm like, okay, it feels a bit inconsistent. But obviously, after how you justified it, the reason for what was going on, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. From the point of view of the general audience, do you think they'll take it the way I'm taking it or the way that you took it? I'm sure there's going to be, of course, there's going to be some people take it the way you take it, some people take it the way I'm taking it. But just in the generality of things, do you think more people will kind of like feel that, okay, this still kind of feels inconsistent because why is he behaving this way if he's only transforming into a fly?
Yeah, I think the movie is pretty clear that it's the unintended interactions of the fly part and the human part.
I think Jonathan was like questioning certain things about the fly and like Brundle or whatever like that. And my biggest question mark was how he was getting all the food in his apartment, because like, was he going out? Especially when he was like towards the latter part of his transformation and he was like really like ugly and really like gruesome to look at. And it's not like they had Deliveroo or Uber Eats back in the day where you could just like leave it on the front porch or just like leave it by the front door or whatever. So he had to kind of step out and stuff like that. That was like my only like question. And it was dumb.
Yeah, I'm not sure where this is set, right? It's just, if it's set in New York, then I think people have seen weirder things.
True, to be fair.
True.
Have you guys ever seen Mimic? Mimic is kind of this Guillermo del Toro movie about, essentially, without going too much into it, essentially it's about a civilization of intelligent cockroaches that kind of live in the subway and kind of slowly take over Manhattan. And one of the gags is that the intelligent cockroaches are kind of walking around in trench coats, and because New Yorkers are New Yorkers, they don't find anything unusual about that. So there is precedent for it. But yeah, no, I kind of just assumed he would either put on a trench coat or pay somebody to do it, or I don't know, rob a convenience store at 3 a.m. or something like that, right? Like it's like he has ways of getting there. But yeah, you're right. Like, this is pre-internet, pre-Deliveroo. How does a giant fly monster get all this junk food? One other thing that kind of occurred to me as I was rewatching this is there are no twists in this, right? Not really. Like, we are told in the first few minutes that he's working on this teleportation device, and then he uses it. And you could call it a twist that he has this accident with the fly, but we're watching a movie called The Fly, so probably doesn't count as a twist. And after that, it's pretty linear, right? Like, he undergoes like a pretty linear series of changes, and everything kind of builds on what came before in a pretty straightforward way. And kind of the main twist is really that he wants to die in the end. Like, when he comes out of the teleporter as the fully realized fly creature, he reverted kind of his perspective of, this is awful, I want this to end. This is just pain and misery. That maybe counts as a twist because it's in contrast to his disposition before that. Pretty much we get about a half an hour of Brundle coming to terms with this and seeing the bright side of this. But there isn't really a gotcha. There's no rug pull. There's no changing the rules at any point during the story, right? So did that work for you? Did this have an impact on you?
For me, yeah. Just like in the totality of things, in terms of like saying the way that the scene played out in the end, I really enjoyed it because it was as if his human instinct started to kick in. Because question, he forced obviously the girl to go into the teleport because he wants to reverse his condition, right?
He basically wants to increase the amount of human in him.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's pretty much. First of all, what's interesting is that he's basically talking to ChatGPT, right? Yeah. He's basically asking the computer questions, and it kind of suggests answers. And that's basically how ChatGPT works now.
Yeah,
which is kind of funny that sci-fi gets so many things wrong, but it kind of got that right. Like, that's how technology ends up working.
Mm.
But basically, the idea is you cannot, like, at first he wants to separate the human part from the fly part, and that is impossible. The computer can't do it. So he wants to increase the amount of human in him.
Yeah.
And that is where the woman comes in.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, because even though he was a monster, and what he was doing would you consider something that a monster would do, it was still kind of like a moment of human nature kicking in, because obviously he was scared and he wanted to obviously reverse what was happening to him. So it showed kind of like his human side. Obviously, his human side that it was showing isn't really something that was positive, but it still showed that, okay, even though he's still human at the end of the day, because he wants to go back to being human, and fear is now taking over, and he's, when fear kicks in, sometimes we do the worst things, and that's literally what was going on. So I didn't see a monster at the time when I was watching that scene, which was crazy, because even though I was looking at a monster, I was seeing the human side of him in the worst way. So for me, it worked.
For me, and it kind of ties back into what we were talking about, how this didn't kind of descend into him terrorizing people. I don't feel like the movie needed a big twist. I don't feel like we needed a gotcha moment, or like the movie to try and outsmart the audience. It wasn't that type of story where there was anything super complex happening, but it more takes you on a journey. I feel like the movie does, and you can see where you're going on this journey. You can see how things are progressing. You can kind of like link back to certain things. It really ties into his transformation, how at the very start he's like, really into like, sugary stuff, like sweet stuff, or the fact that like his skin's starting to like pimple out, or like not to be as clear as it was at the start. It's like the movie's just taking you on a journey, and you feel safe and you feel comfortable on that roller coaster. Well, I wouldn't even say roller coaster ride. It's more kind of like a little teacup just kind of going down around or whatever. But you kind of really feel safe and secure on this journey that the movie takes you on. And again, because it fills it with so much character, and it focuses more on character as opposed to trying to outsmart you, or trying to wow you with a bunch of like random spectacles. It's like you really kind of like buy into who these people are, and it really gets you to care. And this is why I feel like the movie seems to be so well regarded. And I feel like a lot of the movies, and they say like golden age was like 80s, 90s and stuff like that for movies, but the reason that people many years later still feel for these movies is because of the character and the human element that these movies provide in them, as opposed to like a big spectacle that you can get in any type of movie. Like, who cares about the Avengers blowing up a bunch of, Chitauri armies? And I hate that we always go back to Marvel with some of these examples, but, who cares about the Avengers blowing up the Chitauri army? It's cool to watch at the time, but it's not why we're there. It's not why, certain characters went from like, C-listers or D-listers to being like the front and center of, who Marvel are, is because of the characters behind them. So, in certain movies, you do need the twist, you do need the plot twist, you do need to keep your audience guessing, things like murder mysteries, or kind of like, your slashers, who done it, this and the other. You kind of need to keep your audience guessing. But it wasn't needed here. It was a nice journey. I was happy to be on the journey, and it made me care about the characters enough, is what I'd say.
Yeah, I completely agree that the rewatch potential from this comes from the two characters. It's very small, right? It's like there's the Brundle part of the story, which is basically just his lab. And then you've got the Ronnie story, which is kind of split between her apartment and the magazine, right? That she works for. That is very limited, and there's like 4 characters. The cast has 7 characters, and some of them only appear in 1 or 2 scenes. This is completely held up by these 2 characters who kind of go on different but related journeys. And I think that is where the rewatch potential comes from. I think I rewatched it for the 5th time this weekend. When it starts out, it's a little bit, okay, I've seen this many times and I know the effects and they're cool and all. But then 10 minutes in, I'm kind of on board with Ronnie and Brundle, more Ronnie than anybody else. And I think that is why that movie has staying potential, because you can only shock people with the creature effect once. Right, and if you want people to rewatch it, then you have to make them care about the characters. And I think you're spot on about that. One thing that's really kind of surrounding the discourse on this is that this came out in the 80s. This is when HIV was at its height, right? So it was at that point well known, but there was no treatment. and it was like this seemingly all-encompassing, inevitable disease that was just killing people left and right. And so when this movie came out, a whole bunch of people interpreted this as somebody dying from HIV, because it kind of starts out small, and then the evidence mounts, and then finally you basically your body just gives up. And that is a lot what Seth is experiencing, right? And Cronenberg himself has said that it's not about AIDS, it's more like generally about disease, right? It's about realizing that you're sick and that your body is giving up and that it's failing you and that there's nothing you can do about it. Seth's perspective is very much about realizing that this is happening to you, and Ronnie's perception is very much about this is happening to somebody you care about.
I can see where people are coming from, because obviously, well, it wasn't clear if people were having unprotected, coitus, but coitus was happening. Do you know what I'm saying? So it kind of does follow on in terms of like just the timeline of things and how things transpired. It does follow on. You know what I'm saying? So I can see how people could interpret as obviously what we were seeing, the events that was taking place in the film, as that. So I can see it as that.
It's more about the realization that you are
Yeah.
sick. And
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
and that at first they're small signs, and then they get bigger and bigger and harder to ignore, and then your body just stops working.
Yeah.
That's kind of, and like especially that scene when Brundle is kind of looking in the bathroom mirror, and I think a tooth comes out, and I think he realizes that he's kind of secreting this fluid from his fingertips and all of that, right? Like that is the kind of the part where it becomes undeniable that something is wrong. Before it's all of this, oh, he's got some weird hair on his back or whatever. Ronnie notices it, but there's not much. Like nobody thinks too much about it, but that is kind of the part where he realizes that something is wrong. And I think that part, really can really resonate with somebody if they've been in that situation, right? Where you realize this and you can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
it was more kind of related to addiction and like substance abuse or things like that, because when like people feel like they're on top of the world when they're taking various drugs and this that, and the other, and then obviously you have like the demise that comes after that moment, and it kind of really felt like that with Jeff Goldblum's character with Bundy, or whatever his name is, character
El
in this,
Bundy, yeah.
where Bundy, yeah, where he was like really like on a high, felt like he was like discovered this new thing, felt like he was on a high, like felt brand new, felt like he was on top of the world, wanted everyone to kind of like experience it with him, and then you just kind of like slowly saw how this one decision completely like ruined and wrecked his life. So yeah, I don't know, I kind of got more that out of it as opposed to the other, but I can also kind of see it how it could be like related to like a disease just like ravaging your body, and like that mental gymnastic that you kind of do where you're like trying to rationalize it, or you're trying to sort of beat it, or trying to outsmart it, and then you kind of eventually just succumb to it because some things are just not in your control, even though this was in his control. And if he waited, or if he like had proper precautions, he would have like it wouldn't have happened to him. But I don't know, I guess that's life.
I think that interpretation works, at least for the part where he thinks it's the best thing that has happened to him, and he feels euphoric, and he feels like healthier and stronger than he's ever been, and all of that, right? So I think that works. One thing where I think that doesn't quite fit is the whole thing about the pregnancy, where Ronnie realizes she's pregnant, and the conception was after he was transformed, right? There's an ambiguity there where it could have been from before or after, because it all happens over a fairly small period of time. But it's basically freaking out. She has nightmares about kind of this creature kind of growing in her, right? So that's kind of a second type of body horror in this, right? And there's this whole thing about getting the abortion and convincing the doctors to do it right now, and don't do tests, don't wait, get this done now, because this is unpredictable. Nobody has ever dealt with anything like this before. So what was your reaction to that subplot?
Firstly, the whole dream sequence was very weird. Again, just like another part where the movie just like completely grosses me out. Especially when you don't see it at first, and you like see people's reaction to it before you actually see what's come out of her in that dream sequence. Kind of really was like a little bit unnerving. But in terms of like kind of like that whole like subplot of her being pregnant, it did make sense in a sense that she didn't want to go for the teleportation, but like what's kind of like something that like keeps her in there, or like keeps her like sort of involved or emotionally involved in something that she could have like completely walked away from, if not being pregnant. Yeah, I kind of forgot your initial question, but it did add to sort of the anxiety that you feel, or like the uneasiness of sort of kind of like watching her kind of like having to try and like go through it and make that tough decision and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was like a good element of it, and a good sort of because even when you are even like just like a normal pregnancy, it's still like when you really think about it, like you're growing another human inside of you. It's like a really weird experience. Well, none of us will experience it on this podcast, but just the idea of something going from like an egg to like a fetus and just like slowly developing into this actual human inside of you that you then give birth to, and then add on top of like that already weird experience, it potentially being mixed with fly DNA that could transform into something completely weird, just completely like, I don't know, grosses you out. And that's kind of enough to like unnerve anyone.
Yeah, I can just imagine that it's already really freaky when your body's doing things it's never done before, and it just there's these constant changes happening relatively quickly over the course of a few months, right? I think it's a little bit taboo or considered crass to go there now, like to have like body horror related to pregnancy. But I think it's totally understandable why movies keep going to that well, because it's already probably a weird feeling, like a weird sensation, and then you add in the fantastical element. So this goes there, Alien goes there, and I think it's a very understandable place to take the story.
Yeah, I think you touched on it. I was going to say, one of the recent ones was Alien Romulus, that had the whole like pregnant alien baby thing, if I remember correctly, in that movie. That turned into like a like huge.
Yeah, also the original Alien has kind of a similar thing, right? When you're gestating the alien from the facehugger, that certainly has kind of connotations of like a pregnancy as well. First of all, I think it's done like in this movie, it's done in a very effective way, where you follow her reaction to it and her anxiety about it and her terror about it. I kind of see it from two angles. The first is before she was a spectator, where somebody she kind of cares about but has not known for a very long time is undergoing this change, and she's watching it and she cares, but it's not directly impacting her. She's going to walk away from this, right? And then the twist is no, she's like, this is happening to her too. I think that works absolutely. On the other hand, it kind of muddles it a bit, where I think the first half of the movie really lives from the contrast of the two perspectives, where like his perspective is this is happening to me and I kind of did this to myself, and her perspective is I am watching somebody I care about go through this. And I think the difference between those two is the dynamic that drives the first half of the story, and kind of blurring the lines between those two. I don't think it's clear that it makes the story better exactly. Just from a purely
Like,
storytelling perspective, from a how does the story unfold, how do these characters relate to each other, it's like it blurs the lines a little bit, and I can see both sides of the argument for why this is a good idea or not a good idea.
yeah, because I'm trying to think if they didn't go there, how would they have kept the story interesting? Granted, we're not making him like a villain in this movie. How do you then keep the story interesting? Because like we've seen it develop, we've seen her reaction, we've seen kind of like all of that already in terms of her lose himself and not being able to do anything about it. I don't know. I just can't see like how they could have like continued that, or like and kept it interesting.
It's just a thought. Like I don't know that it's enough to just have her watch him go through this. That might get monotonous after a while, but it's just a thought. Just one thing I wanted to quickly bring into this. One of my pet peeves in stories like this is when kind of the moral of the story is that science is evil, that, oh, they're just things we should not mess with, that there are lines we should not cross. And those lines are pretty arbitrary and just based on kind of the vibes of what we feel comfortable with at the moment. But there's no good reason for why doing a certain thing or not doing it is over the line or not. And I don't think this movie quite goes there, right? Yes, there's science that goes wrong, but it's mostly because of Brundle's flaws, right? He's too impatient. He rushes things. He experiments on himself rather than doing proper investigations or doing proper tests, right? He cuts a whole lot of corners. And if he hadn't, then this probably wouldn't have happened, right? Like the merging with the fly would probably have happened with a baboon, like with a monkey or something like that. And then they would have realized, oh, you have to be really careful what you put into this teleportation device, and maybe you really shouldn't put people in there. Maybe you really should just, teleport just objects. And that's already revolutionary, right? If he stops there, he's already made history. But no, he has to go further, and he has to do it himself, and he has to go it alone, and he has to ignore all safety precautions. And that is why this is happening to him. So I didn't feel like, and I'm really sensitive to this because movies do this all the time, and I just hate it. I think it's a toxic idea that movies do way too often, and often not do very, very well. And I didn't feel that here. I felt like this was very much Brundle's personal feelings as opposed to science is dangerous.
Curiosity kills rather than I don't think in this situation
there are like historical examples of like the people who discovered radioactivity died from cancer, right? Because they poisoned themselves. So on some level, discovery is dangerous, right? But there's a lot of air between that and science is the problem.
Yeah, and this one, they didn't like abuse science. Well, no, he abused science. Science didn't abuse him. That's the point. I think it was just right in terms of well, personally for me, I do hear where you're coming from. I don't like have an issue with stuff like that in terms of like science is evil, but at the same time, I do understand why someone would be annoyed about that. And in a way, science was kind of helping him as well, like you said, ChatGPT. So it was actually giving him the answers to actually reverse his situation. So it was helpful in a way, and yeah, I think it was just good, just the way that they just conveyed how it was actually his curiosity going, because even though, yes, science was behind his transformation, he was the one that was actually behind his transformation because he was so curious and because he just wanted more. Like you said, he could have just stopped there with the transportation with the monkey, right? But instead, he chose to continue because, like I said, it was the curiosity of how far could his creation go. I'm saying, how far could he reach? Do you know what I'm saying? So
doesn't it also kind of show the dangers of human emotion when you're kind of like working with such revolutionary pieces of science? Because part of it was also obviously that he was like curious, but in that particular moment, he didn't wait for Ronnie or didn't kind of follow through with the plan that they had because he thought that she was going back to her ex and sleeping with her ex and sneaking out in the middle of the night to go and be with her. And it's like, those human like emotions that are very strong can like really drive you to make dumb decisions. And again, like I said, there wasn't like really anything in the science that said it was bad or was like, you shouldn't do this. Like if anything, the only thing that I kind of felt bad for was like the monkeys being tested on, especially with the one that was like that had its skin removed or whatever happened to that. But
I think it turned inside out.
Yeah, that. But yeah, it was more kind of like how human emotions, and I think this one was like more to do with like relationship and love and stuff like that, which may not always be the case because it might be in like a professional work setting or something like that, and maybe you don't have like those set emotional connections with like the people that you have around. So maybe it wasn't the best example to kind of like maybe try and have that debate with and be like, okay, like, this is how human emotions can really like take over oneself or like, really push you to use these technologies and these discoveries in the wrong way or like to misuse it or to kind of push too far too early with some of this stuff. And maybe it could have been like a different scenario that he was presented with. Either way, it just kind of shows the flaws of man and how no matter how good science is, no matter how good the technology is, and he pretty much almost had it working correctly, but end of the day is lapse of, like even like lapse of concentration, lapse of checking for specific anomalies and stuff like that led to his downfall.
I would say it's specifically Brundle's flaws. It's his ego, it's his grandiosity, it's his desire to be a hero or to be famous, and then it's his jealousy that makes him cut even more corners. It would have been very easy for the movie to have somebody have a big speech about, oh, like we should never have crossed this line or whatever, right? I just appreciate the fact that it didn't. So one last topic I want to get into is the ending. So I really like endings. And this is a very heavy ending. I think it's one of the best endings in a movie like this. I think like it definitely makes the top 10 for me because it's just so pitch perfect where Brundle comes out of the teleporter, he's turned into this scary creature, and then within a minute it turns like specifically Ronnie's emotional state changes from fear and disgust to pity, and then back to fear again when she realizes what's happening. I think it's two different kinds of fears. I think first she's afraid of him, and then she's afraid for him. I think that's different. And in between, you have this fly creature that is scary and repulsive and all of that, begging to be killed because he just cannot stand his own existence anymore. And then it kind of fades just to black, just with Ronnie completely falling apart after having killed Brundle.
It was pretty ruthless, especially the way how he got taken out. It was enjoyable because even though what was going on was ruthless and it was very like it was what a monster would do, I still saw the human in him near the end. So, but obviously prior to that, in terms of what happened, everything before that, it was good. I don't really have much to say because I already said what my favorite thing about the ending was kind of seeing the human in the monster. So that was my favorite thing about the ending.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it kind of just like maintained what the movie had been doing throughout in terms of like focusing on that emotional core, and it really kind of brought it together. Like you said, she kind of went through almost every emotion in that final showdown of like being afraid, finding courage, having sympathy, having empathy. It kind of like went through, all the emotions in that particular scene. And again, for me, it was just a continuation of what had come before. So it was almost like a crescendo of like, what the movie had been. And it like really came to a head at that point. And yeah, it really worked for me, I would say.
And it also showed like how strong a woman's love can be. Because obviously you see many like situations in life where if a like woman really loves you, she'll go literally like hell and back for you in terms of like it could be, for example, I've seen situations where women stay with men after like unfortunately where they go through like a situation where they got burnt in a fire and then their whole bodies, I'm saying it's been affected and stuff, and they'll still stay. And I don't know why I kind of got that from her interaction with her relationship, and obviously the way that she's kept on coming back for the main character. So I don't know. It just the first thing I just got to me, damn, like I'm saying, she really loves this guy, and then and she's trying to like she's. Like, there was one scene as well. This wasn't in the end. This was before where when his ear fell off, she hugged him. I was like, Jesus Christ, she's actually not doing this because she's doing it because she really either is loved and she really cares about him, and she's scared what's gonna happen to him. So because that she proper hugged him as well, and it's like she got all the stuff on her. So I'm thinking, damn, like I was thinking like, why is her love for this guy so strong? Because they haven't known each other for so long. So it was just her journey throughout this was interesting to watch, even though her performance was a bit stale. It was still interesting to watch. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, like just like different forms of emotion showing. Even though it was showing, it was still kind of like reinforced in love. And what I mean by that is in she was still there. Okay, the justification for why she was still there was because of the love.
I just think it's really refreshing for a movie to actually have a bold ending like this. That actually ends on a tragic note. It's definitely a downer ending. Like nobody walked away from this feeling good, right? There's no triumph. There's no saving the day. There's just mercy, and that's it, and compassion, which are good things. But it's like the grimmest versions of those impulses, I think. So I think just like I like endings. I think most movies waste their ending, and this didn't. And I think this is definitely a final shot that can stay with you if
It
you
was
let
tragic,
it.
but it wasn't really tragic at the same time because she still did that out of love. That was the icing on the cake, to be honest. Because, like I said, like, there had to be a justification for why she's still there, and it was love. And the ending at the end proves that okay, she really loved this guy because she put him out of his misery. You know what I'm saying, and he wanted to be put
Yeah,
out of
but
his misery.
but having to kill the person you love out of compassion to put them out of the misery is not a good ending.
It's not a good ending, but I'm saying it just kind of it still falls in line with like when people say if you really care about someone, let them go. So it was kind of it was like that.
If you really care about somebody, pull the trigger. Right? Like it is tragic, given that so many movies get this wrong. I think it's just worth praising when this movie gets it right. All right, so to wrap it up, I think we all like this movie, right? But does this go on the shelf? Is this worth revisiting? Is this worth putting on in a stormy October night to be weirded out a little bit by Jeff Goldblum's acting? What's the deal?
I would put it on the shelf. I think this makes it on the shelf. This was kind of hits a lot of or ticks a lot of the boxes I look for in some of these movies. Great story, great character work as well. I would say, even though I wasn't like in love with all the performances, but great character work, great kind of like conveying of various emotions, and yeah, just like I would say like decent chemistry as well between like the two leads or the people that we're kind of focusing on this. So I think for me, definitely goes on the shelf.
For me, I'm battling with that question, but if I had to be honest to myself, I don't. It wouldn't go on the shelf, but it was a great experience. It was something that I would definitely reference when it comes to body horror.
Yeah, sometimes you can. It's enough to remember a movie without having to watch it again.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, there are a few, like there's a few examples this year where I said, okay, I don't have to. I'm glad I watched this. Gonna remember it. Don't have to watch it again.
The Long Walk.
Long Walk is one of those. Yeah.
Guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion.
If you reach this part of the episode, of course, as always, we appreciate your support and spending your time checking us out. And as always, if you like what you heard today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a bunch of nonsense, then you might just find yourself in a teleporting machine with a fly. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys, we'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.